Hello, this is Eric Thompson. I am the CEO of Peerless Wealth. We are an SEC registered investment advisory firm headquartered in Columbus, Ohio. Thanks as always for tuning in. This video is going to be on wars and conflict and their effect on the markets, which I try to do things timely. So this is being recorded April 1st, and by the time you get it, things are probably going to change a little bit, but there's always sort of a crisis du jour going on. And right now, as most of you know, we've invaded Iran and oil prices have shot up pretty high, and we've noticed it at the pump too. These kind of events, very important not to sort of get too panicky or worried or excited or too optimistic either. So I think historical context is probably the best thing to look at. I'll start with some good news in that the United States is much less dependent on oil from the Mideast than we used to be. About 30 years ago, almost 30% what the US needed for oil, we had to import from the Mideast. Today, it's less than 10%. So that makes us a lot less dependent on what's going on over there, but it has shot up prices. And when oil prices go up, they go up even if we make it here too. And it's caused gas prices to go up. I think I just paid $4 a gallon. Interestingly, people forget this, but in 2007, gas prices were $4 a gallon. So in a historical context, we've been pretty lucky with not a lot of increase in gas, but it's something that everybody uses and is regularly reminded, and so it's definitely a focal point. The other thing, in the current environment, when oil prices go up, at least for an extended period of time, which has been the fear recently, is that that's going to cause inflation to either go up or remain a little higher than what economists would like to see it at. And when inflation is running a little higher than maybe where it should be, that means there's less of a chance that the Federal Reserve will decrease interest rates. So it means interest rates will stay maybe a little bit high too, things like mortgage rates. And so we've seen a little bit of an uptick in the 30-year mortgage from, the low sixes to the mid sixes. Now, the good news, just last couple of days, it appears like we might be to the tail end of this thing, but let's do a little bit of a history lesson. And I gathered some data and you'll see it come up on the screen here pretty soon. And what it looks at is the broad equity market, the S&P 500. It shows how it reacted to previous wars and geopolitical events initially, and then it shows what happened a year later, 2 years later, and then I have 4 years later too. So let's go through a couple of examples. The first one, Iraq invades Kuwait in 1990. We had an initial drop of almost 16% in the S&P 500. 1 year later, it was up 34%. And that's not from the bottom. That's not after the 16% drop, then up 34. It's up 34% from before when it started going down. And then 2 years later, up 49%. 4 years later, up 68%. So short run, a bit of a shock. Long run, still pretty good. And it's a pretty typical pattern. We can go through almost every conflict there, and you see the initial drop, and you see what it was 12 months later, 24 months later, 4 years later. I would say the one exception is in the middle, the Afghanistan war in 2001. We saw an initial drop of less than 1%. I would say the one exception to sort of the trend you see, the trend being the initial drop and then the rebound, is the third one down, Kosovo conflict, and that was in 1999. You saw an initial drop of 4%. 12 months later was okay, plus 18, but then some negatives, and then 4 years later, you're still down. What was happening there is the timing of that was not so much war related, it was the dot-com bubble bursting. In 2000, all the hyped up dot-coms fell really hard. And in fact, it took a couple of years and they kept falling. And then in 2002, we had the September 11th attacks, so that was a really rough 3-year stretch. So that's probably the only exception to that. And it wasn't really due to the war. It was due to primarily the overvaluation of dot-coms and September 11th. But if you look at the averages, the initial drop down 6.1%, 12 months later, up almost 17%, 2 years later, up almost 29%. And obviously the one we're going through now, the last one on the list, the Iran conflict, we were down roughly 9% from peak to trough, most of that in March. As we speak, it's rebounded a little bit, so obviously we don't know the future. But this gives us a good historical backdrop on things, but past performance is no guarantee of future result, as they say. So always scary headlines, but another example of why investing in good quality companies tends to work out over time, even if certain areas of the world are under stress. So I thought that was a good reminder. I hope you learned something, and tune in next time.